Are you parenting from trauma? How would you know? How would they know? They're going to know. They're going to know, and you're going to know. There's ways you can kind of figure this out, and I'm going to tell you a few things to help you potentially identify ways you may be parenting from trauma. So, when I say parenting from trauma, I mean parts of you that were traumatized, whether from childhood or somewhere along in life up until your current age, is completely shaping the way in which you parent your child. How controlling you are, the lack of control, how consistent you are, the lack thereof, how present you are, or the lack thereof. All of these things can be a result of certain types of trauma you may have endured. And this will all happen primarily subconsciously. Some of it you may be doing intentional, and some of it you may be doing it unintentionally because you do not realize it is from your trauma. And so, if you have experienced certain types of hardship or certain things that have happened to you that cause significant impact in a negative way that you have especially unresolved or unhealed or have not acknowledged, you sweep it under the rug, you think it's not a big deal, you tell yourself it's not a big deal, you trying to make it not be a big deal by suppressing it, then it is going to manifest itself because it is present. The thing is, if you ever heard of the book The Body Keeps the Score, strongly recommend you read it. Your body doesn't forget, and that's where the term PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, comes from. That even though you may not be in that situation anymore, certain triggers tells your brain or your body that you are back in the situation that you were in before. For example, when it comes to PTSD, I think the most relatable or easiest to understand is an example of a war veteran. War veterans with PTSD who have served in active war, who are used to gunshots, been shot at, have been shot, those loud noises, cannons, bombs, all those things. When they come back to being civilians and live locally with their families, loud noises such as fireworks and other things can give them like shell shock responses, whiplash, and things like that. That is PTSD, amongst other symptoms. I'm not telling you how to diagnose PTSD. I'm just giving you examples of ways how PTSD can manifest. And so, although the person who served in the service, thank you for your service, if that is you, although they are no longer there, they're not where they were deployed, they are home, they're in their beds, they're at home, they may be with family, they're somewhere very familiar. These noises, even sirens and things like that, can put them in a state of shock or high anxiety or other things, some people psychosis, because it feels, sounds, or seems familiar of being in the war zone or whatever situation they were in when they experienced that, even though they are now safe. Their body is still responding as though they are unsafe. Their brain is telling them, oh, you're in danger, someone's shooting, duck, hide, you can die. And they react as such, even though that is not the case. And so a lot of other traumatic experiences can kind of happen in the same way, where you are no longer in that situation, you're no longer in your parents' home or around your abuser in the ways you've been abused, but certain people, smells, sounds, fragrances, all these things, and only in therapy, primarily in therapy, are you able to uncover or unveil those triggers, because they can be difficult to identify. It could be somebody wearing a certain color shirt, people who look a certain way, a certain demeanor. These types of things can cause your body to still respond as though you are in danger again, even though you are not. When that comes to parenting, what that can look like is your kid and their behaviors or what they do can also be now a trigger. Whether they look like someone that's abused you, that I talked about in a previous video, they may act a certain way, they may sound a certain way, they do certain things that feel familiar to you, and because you know they are not them, they're not that size, they're not that age, or even that sex even, you do not connect it as a trigger and you brush it off, but you overreact to these responses from your kid. And even sometimes you may say, I don't know why I react like that, I don't know why that gets under my skin. Think about it. What are times you've needed to discipline your child, or your child has done something, and after you've reflected and maybe somebody else has brought it to your attention, and depending on the age of your child, they may have said something to you, told you, my son would tell me, if I'm overreacting And you just sit and say, and if you don't do this, you should reflect on your behavior towards your children, regardless, and say, why does that bother me? Why does that get under my skin? Why did I react that way? Why am I so mad about that? Especially if you were someone who believes in corporal punishment, that would be a different video of my thoughts and opinions on that, if it works or not. But maybe you did too much, what you hit them with, or how you responded, or people who ground their kids for 6 months to a year. That's totally unrealistic. Do not do that. It's stupid and it does not work. But do you? Don't say I didn't tell you that it won't work. But when you have these extreme responses to your child's behavior, and you may say like, why am I that upset? Why do I want my kids grounded for 3 months? Could they have done something serious? Yes. Should the punishment match the crime or offense? Absolutely. But when it comes to consequences to kids, which will be a separate video, it needs to make sense. First of all, depending on their age, in 3 months, it's not going to be tied to whatever they did. Secondly, could this been resolved by a conversation? If you didn't get so upset, so worked up, so offended, or whatever was triggered in you, could you have responded and addressed their behavior in a different manner? So the other side of raising children or parenting from trauma is also parenting from fear. Because you're afraid of all the things that happen to you or things that happen in the world, because it's a dangerous place to raise kids right now, and you don't want them to happen to your kids, it will blindside you and enable you and restrict you from doing things or having certain conversations or teaching your kids certain things that they should know that could actually protect them. But because you're afraid of them having that information, which I spoke about in another video, because you're afraid that that information may backfire in some way, you don't give that to them. And so the main thing I want to talk about, I do have my notes. So if you see me looking down, that's what that is when you're parenting from trauma, there's a certain thing considered like secondary trauma that I've heard about. And so what do I mean by secondary trauma? You traumatize your kids from things they have not been through. When you're being super strict or super critical or whatever you're doing, when you are probably overreacting and you're doing too much, as the kids would say, or you're being extra, as the kids would say, you can cause trauma that did not exist for your kids, even though they didn't experience it. Let me tell you, say you've been through something. A story comes to mind. I had a student when I was a school counselor who, she was telling me, and I'm not laughing at her, it's not funny. It's funny at the way these things work. I love what I do and all of the things psychology related. So don't take my smirks and smiles. This is a laughing matter. I just think this stuff is really interesting and I nerd out on it if you can't tell. So this student was telling me once upon a time, this was years ago, about how they felt about their parents and that their dad was this terrible person and their dad did all this stuff to them and did this stuff to their mom because parents give their kids too much information. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the kid was telling me that part of her burden was this information about her parents. My dad did this, was beating my mom, and my dad did this, and she's telling me this as if she remembers, but she doesn't. Let me tell you how I know. I asked her, how old were you when this happened? Some of it, she said, when her mom was pregnant with her. She does not have memory of that. And some of it, she said, right after her mom had her, when she was an infant. Research shows it is very uncommon to have memories before the age of 5. Some people do. If you're one of them, congratulations. But in general, the average person doesn't remember much before the age 5. Okay? You definitely don't remember anything from before you could talk. Your level of consciousness, you don't know object permanence. There's so many things just developmentally, it's not possible. So if you yourself are saying, oh, when I was 2 or 3, somebody told you and you are now traumatized from an experience someone told you about. Okay. So anyways, this girl was telling me about all this stuff and she had real feelings attached to this situation she did not witness or remember. And I asked her, I said, well, and I validated her. I'm just giving y'all a quick synopsis. But I asked her, how do you remember things before you were born? Like, if you were in your mom's stomach. How do you remember this? And she says, I don't know. And so I asked her, how do you know this? Like, how are you so sure? And she talked, I do this therapeutically, right? It's not condescending. It's not belittling. This is a conversation, but I'm just getting to the gist of parts of the conversation that matter for this particular point. Long story short, her mom told her all the things her dad used to do. And I'm assuming explained to her why her mom and her dad are not together anymore. This child was now in middle school when she was telling me this story. But again, she was having very real experiences in real life, in real time, at that time in middle school, about stuff she remembered from when she was younger. She was now traumatized about what she heard happen to her from the trauma her mom endured. She did not experience it. Another story is, and this was kids on kids. I had kids, a group of kids that were all friends, come to tell me the same story. And initially it seemed like they may have all related because they had similar situations. And this is why I have a problem with people sharing stuff on social media, because when things feel relatable, and for people who are empaths, they adopt this trauma in these stories. But these kids were all coming to me as if this was a traumatic event. The teachers were concerned. And I did a lot of investigative work, trust me, during my time as a school counselor, but I learned a lot and loved the experience. I'm so much better for it. And so, long story short, this situation that they were telling me about happened to one student who told her friends, who all empathized and felt bad for her and just put themselves in her shoes. They had all felt the heaviness. It was almost difficult. If I wasn't a licensed professional counselor at the time, I was a school counselor, I don't know that I would have had the skills to do this, but I was, because they are separate if you didn't know. If I didn't know what I was doing, I wouldn't have been able to tell, and I would have thought all of them were telling the truth. Initially, I did believe all of them, because why would they lie? Their stories just were too exact. And the details in which they didn't remember didn't make sense. And eventually it led me, again, I'm a professional, so I know what I'm doing. It led me to ask questions, and I was like, whose story is this? How do y'all have the same story? And eventually one of them was like, oh no, this happened to so-and-so. She told us about it. And I just feel bad for her. And they were very open. I was very close to all my students. They're all like my children. And so again, these kids now lived as if this situation happened to them, and it didn't. So when kids say they have early memories, a lot of times it may or may not be true. Some of it may be true, and they can get it from other places. And so if you have experienced trauma and you displace that and project that onto your children too can in turn appear traumatized, or act as if they're traumatized. So what you should do, whether you're parenting from trauma or not, if you're not aware, if you're not sure or not, what you should do, practice saying sorry. It goes a long way. Apologize. One, because it's teaching them manners and accountability. The same accountability you want them to have, you should have. When they mess up, you expect them to apologize. You tell them to apologize to their teachers and to their friends and whoever else, or even to yourself. If they've disobeyed, you say, you need to apologize. You should apologize too. You are not above apologizing because of your age. You are not above apologizing because you are a parent. Everybody in this situation is human. If you have offended or wronged your child, you should say sorry. It is the right thing to do, and this is a matter of right and wrong, not about how you feel. It's not because I said so, I'm grown. They will be grown too one day, and they will act just like you if they don't already. But practice what you preach. Take accountability. You are imperfect. It will make you relatable. It will help your relationship with your children. Say sorry if you have done something wrong. Whether you snapped because you had a bad day, or because your boss pissed you off, or because you got stuck in traffic because you were late to work, or even because they forgot to brush their teeth and you cursed them out till you were blue in the face. Completely unwarranted. Apologize. And that is going to take a lot of humility, and a lot of parents should practice humility because you are human. Okay? A lot of people want to use this phrase, honor your parents, from the Bible. Bible thumping. I prohibit it. You can be religious. I am Christian myself. I raised my son with Christian values, not extreme ones, not values that hurt other people or other groups of people, to be clear, but biblical principles, I would say, and to have a relationship with Christ. You do not have to agree with me, but if you're a person who are of a particular religion, regardless of what that is, do not use and abuse, do not weaponize the Bible, especially if you are not doing the things the Bible says. If you are not living according to the Bible, why, again, are you holding your child to that standard? It's hypocritical, it's unfair, and it's unrealistic. So if you're going to use the scripture, honor your parents, also apply the scripture, do not provoke your child. If you are lying to your kids, even white lies, and being mischievous and sneaky and doing things to get your way or to coerce or force your child to do things they wouldn't otherwise do, which is called manipulation, regardless if you're a parent or not, and your kid gets upset, rightfully so, because you have done a thing that upsets them, they're allowed to have their feelings, and you've provoked them, then you do not get to throw a temper tantrum and say, because I'm grown, because I'm a parent, because whatever, and say, I'm your mom, I'm your dad, you need to respect me. That goes both ways. Again, I'm speaking to those who are religious people for that particular point, but in general, respect goes both ways. And even if your child respects you out of fear, which is a whole different conversation right now, when you get older, you will find out how they really feel about you. Because one day they won't have to tolerate you, and they won't. And you will find that what you assumed or hoped was respect wasn't at all. And they might resent you. The main point I want to make to take this home about parenting from trauma is trauma dumping. Go back to my initial story. Be mindful of what you share with your children and when you share them. If you want to tell your kids about a time you made a bad grade in school, when they make their bad grade in second grade, totally fine. Always remember age-appropriate conversations, which I have yet to make a video about, but age-appropriate conversations. And I don't think people understand that because people don't understand developmental stages, which is in the video before this one, about knowing when to talk about certain things or tackle certain situations. If you as an adult, rule of thumb, my rule of thumb, if you as an adult can't handle what you've been through, what in your right mind or wrong one makes you think a child can handle the stresses you're enduring? If you cannot at your grown age, neither can your child. And it is unfair to put it on them. Some of you are just venting. Some of you are just having a hard time and having a meltdown. And those of you who fit in that category, you need to find friends and or a therapist. And I would just say start with a therapist. Now, a therapist is not feasible as far as affordability, but talk to other adults. If you were confiding in your child as a best friend because you had kids, because you wanted somebody that would love you, and you just, oh, I listen to my kids listen to me, I just tell my kids everything, that is sick. You should not be that comfortable in relating to a child. In the same way, any other relationship with a child is inappropriate for an adult. They are not your confidant. That doesn't even make sense because they don't even understand what you're going through. And what do you want them to do about it? The fact that you just want to be heard and need somebody to hear you, you should seek a professional. If nothing else, seek another adult. Find a group, a support group that's going through what you're going through. Yes, your kids will listen, but they don't have much of a choice. And guess what? Those kids carry that burden. And now they live a life as if they've gone through these things themselves because they feel bad for you because they do love you. And now you're just ruining their life and their mental health. That's selfish and inappropriate. You should not be explaining what another adult did to you inappropriately when they're a child, unless it comes up in a way that makes sense age appropriately, and you don't need to give details. They do not need to know why you and your spouse are no longer together in detail. First of all, they don't know what you're talking about. They don't know what infidelity is. And it's not appropriate at 7 for you to say so-and-so cheated or they went to have another family. Those kids will figure that out when they get older and are old enough to understand. Just say y'all didn't get along. We got to have this conversation, age appropriate. Stop trauma dumping, as y'all like to call it, on your children. If you don't know what to do with it, they don't either. And it's hurting them more than it's hurting you because they do not, and they adopt it and it sits with them and they have a harder time processing it than you because they are underage and their brains are not finished developed. Yours are, and we got to make better decisions because there's certain things you're doing that could be harming your kids even though you have good intentions. Sometimes you're oversharing with the intent to, I just want to protect them. I want them to know how the world works. I want them to know what's going on. And I get that. But sometimes y'all be doing too much. And other times you're not doing enough. Do I think balance is completely realistic? No, I don't. But I think you should search for one. I think what you're doing should make sense. Don't tell them stuff just to try to get your way or to scare them. And also, if you know this is a touchy subject for you and difficult for you to talk about, it's probably not appropriate for your child. That's all I'm going to say about that. Everything else I will cover between parenting out of fear and age-appropriate conversations and whatever other rants I come up with along the way. So stay tuned to hear more about that.